The timeless axiom of Socrates rings true: the unexamined life is not worth living. In these words, we unearth the essence of philosophical inquiry, a relentless quest for truth and understanding that transcends the confines of mere existence. Indeed, have you ever found yourself ensnared in the labyrinth of doubt, sensing the fallacy in someone's argument but unable to articulate it? It's a sensation akin to grasping at shadows in the darkness, yearning for the clarity that eludes our grasp. Whether it's challenging the prevailing narrative within a friend group, engaging in a spirited debate, or simply wielding the sword of reason amidst the solitude of a shower, the desire to confront falsehoods and illuminate truth is a universal longing. In the annals of history, Socrates stands as a beacon of intellectual rigor, gazing upon the tapestry of ancient Athens with a discerning eye. His quest was not merely to dominate others with facts and logic, but to incite introspection and critical inquiry in the hearts and minds of his fellow citizens. For everywhere he looked, he beheld a populace ensnared by beliefs devoid of justification, a tapestry woven from the fabric of ignorance and complacency. So, let us heed the call to arms, embarking on a journey of relentless interrogation and self-examination. For it is in the crucible of questioning that we forge the sword of enlightenment, carving a path through the fog of uncertainty towards the shores of truth. And in the words of Socrates, let us remember that the pursuit of wisdom is not merely a noble endeavor, it is the very essence of a life worth living. He could not let things go on like this. Athens had to be taught critical thinking, and Socrates was going to do it even if it killed him. Here we are going to look at Socrates' famous questioning technique with a few bonus additions from me and see why it worked so well. By the end of this video perhaps you too will be able to transform history forever. Get ready to learn how Socrates would disarm an argument without anyone even noticing, how to ensure that your worldview is not full of holes, and how we can apply critical thinking in our everyday lives. Let's get started. 1. Pre-arguing. I find that critical discussions can be a little bit like heavy exercise. It is helpful to mentally stretch beforehand to put yourself in the right mindset and to see if this argument is worth your time or your opponent's, and this is where pre-arguing comes in. It is something you see Socrates do quite a lot in Plato's dialogues, and it often comes in the form of checking underlying definitions and assumptions. Say you and I are having a debate about God's existence, however you happen to be a deist, that is someone who does not believe that God controls the universe but just kicked it off. I may not know this and assume that you are a theist, someone who believes that God is still actively involved in the universe. As a result, if I were to challenge your worldview on the basis of some classic theological questions like the problem of evil, then that would not be strictly relevant here. Indeed, the divergence in definitions can often act as a barrier to fruitful discourse, as we navigate the labyrinth of language in search of common ground. In the realm of theological debate, the very concept of God can be a nexus of divergent interpretations, each imbued with its own nuances and implications. Your perspective envisions a God intimately intertwined with the fabric of existence, an active participant in the unfolding drama of the universe. Conversely, my conception leans towards a more aloof deity, distant and detached from the affairs of mortals. It's a dichotomy that reflects the myriad interpretations that have shaped theological discourse throughout history. Yet, amidst this semantic quagmire, lies the crux of the issue. The inability to reconcile divergent definitions stifles the potential for meaningful dialogue. When one asserts the non-existence of a God defined in one manner, while another upholds the existence of a God defined differently, the debate becomes an exercise in futility, an echo chamber of conflicting assertions. This phenomenon isn't confined to theological discussions alone. In the arena of politics, terms like socialist, capitalist, left-wing, and right wing, often serve as lightning rods for contention, each laden with connotations shaped by personal beliefs and cultural context. When participants operate from divergent definitions, the discourse devolves into a battle of semantics, devoid of substantive engagement. To break free from this impasse, we must strive for clarity and mutual understanding, transcending the limitations imposed by semantic discrepancies. By elucidating our respective definitions and seeking common ground, we pave the way for constructive dialogue, fostering a shared journey towards enlightenment and consensus. Only then can we navigate the tumultuous waters of discourse with purpose and clarity, transcending the confines of semantics to forge genuine connections and insights. This is a practical example of why it is so important to clarify key terms and assumptions before you enter a debate, that is, if you want it to be a productive discussion aimed at truth. To return to our argument about the definition of God, if I had stopped to ask what your definition of God is, I might discover that we disagree a lot less than I initially thought. It would also tell me not to invoke arguments that are leveled specifically at a theist position. At the very least, this can save you and your interlocutors some time, but at its most extreme it can prevent shouting matches over a disagreement based on an illusion. One of the first questions Socrates tends to ask people in Plato's dialogues is for the definitions of some key terms, be it justice or beauty or love. Socrates wants to know how they are using the word. If they have a disagreement, Socrates often changes the discussion to be about which definition they should use so that they can agree on this before they move forward. Without doing this, all of the dialogues would just be a waste of everyone's precious time, and I want to make a short addition to Socrates' questions here. I think a good question to ask both ourselves and our interlocutors at the beginning of a discussion is, under what circumstances would you or I be wrong? This works wonderfully for a couple of reasons. The first is that it establishes whether someone is interested in having a real good faith discussion or whether they are simply interested in defending their position to the death. If someone really cannot imagine that they would change their mind under any circumstances, then chances are the debate just is not worth having. And secondly, it gives a real insight into the factors that motivate someone's belief. If I was arguing in favor of legalizing euthanasia, I still might concede that, but I would change my mind if most people were pressured into the decision. That would give you an insight into the underlying ideas that maintain my position. For instance, I'm likely to think that laws should be justified on their consequences rather than believing they should mimic a preordained set of moral rules, and I know it can get tedious, but it is genuinely worth going through this pre-argumentation stage before a debate enters full swing. The two key questions to ask here are, what definitions are we using for the key terms in our discussion, and under what circumstances would we change our minds? But obviously we can't stop there now. We have to actually have the argument, and next we will look at my favorite type of Socratic question, one that can easily find potential flaws in a position without making someone retreat into a defensive shell. Absolutely. Inviting genuine dialogue and fostering understanding are crucial steps towards productive discourse. By acknowledging the possibility that we may not fully grasp our interlocutor's perspective, we demonstrate humility and a willingness to engage in a meaningful exchange of ideas. Admitting uncertainty about our understanding of an opponent's position can indeed disarm the tension inherent in arguments. It signals a genuine interest in comprehension rather than a desire for domination or humiliation. This shift in approach lays the groundwork for a more collaborative and respectful exchange, where both parties feel heard and valued. Moreover, embracing this posture of humility opens the door to clarificatory questions, which are essential for untangling the web of misunderstanding that often obscures genuine communication. Through thoughtful inquiry and active listening, we can peel back the layers of ambiguity and misconception, revealing the core of our differing perspectives. Anecdotally, This approach has been shown to foster greater empathy and mutual respect in discussions, paving the way for constructive dialogue and the exploration of common ground. It's a testament to the transformative power of humility and curiosity in bridging the gap between opposing viewpoints and forging genuine connections. People are much more likely to change or shift their position when they spot a flaw in their argument themselves rather than having them pointed out by some bastard like me. So often the best way to highlight the flaws in someone's position is to ask them to clarify what they mean. Let the holes in their argument be exposed. That way, in Plato's Republic, the character of Socrates debates with Themis, who argues that justice is whatever the stronger person desires. So Socrates asks him exactly what he means by this, and Themis replies by saying that justice is whatever advantages the stronger person, but then he has immediately revealed his mistake, because what the stronger person desires and what the stronger person benefits from are two separate things. Someone very powerful might be mistaken about what benefits them, and in such a situation Phrymarus is caught in a contradiction, and it is only through asking him exactly what he means that Socrates was able to uncover this contradiction in his worldview. To give a more up-to-date example, imagine that you and I are having a discussion and I say we should not listen to the opinions of immoral people. You might challenge this position by asking me, what do you mean by immoral that makes someone's opinions no longer worth listening to? I might reply that immoral people are more likely to make mistakes due to their poor character, but you can then ask me, what do you mean by mistakes? I might reply by saying that they will mistake good actions for bad ones and bad for good, but at this point you can point out that my argument only actually covers moral debates, and it leaves it open that immoral people might be perfectly worth listening to on other topics without having to outright challenge my position. You've transformed it from a grand claim into a much more circumspect one, which you could now attack in other ways should you choose to do so. The key question here is, what do you mean by that? It sounds so simple, but it is devastatingly effective, and it is important to approach this with genuine curiosity. It might expose your interlocutor as having an outright contradiction in their views, but it could just as easily reveal its indisputable coherence. Either way, you will understand your opponent's position much better, and this is essential for a productive discussion, and it is worth asking this question to ourselves as well. It can help us understand our own positions. When was the last time you sat back and examined your worldview to see where there are unclarified terms or where you couldn't explain it simply? This can be an excellent exercise to check that we truly know what we think and that we are not accidentally parting an opinion we have picked up from somewhere else. But there is a key type of question we have yet to examine, and without it any accounts of Socratic questioning would be woefully incomplete. 3 causes and reasons. This is the quintessential philosophical question, why do you think that? But it's worth noting that this in turn can split into 2 further questions, each with their own purposes. The first is, what has caused you to think that, and the second is, what are your reasons for thinking that? I know they look similar, but there is a crucial difference. Say I am again arguing in favor of Ethan's legality and you want to know the cause of my belief. I might answer by saying that I've heard the testimony of many suffering people who say in earnest that they would like to end their own lives, and the emotions I felt in response have to a certain extent motivated my position. This is a causal story. One thing happened and my belief was affected by it, but importantly the causal process did not run through my reason or my deliberation, and this might be different to my reasons for supporting the legalization of euthanasia. It could be that the primary reason for my position is that I think everyone has the right to do what they wish with their own body provided it is not directly harming other people, and that I think euthanasia falls into this category of action. This is not just a cause, it is a reasoned argument. It's worth noting that in some accounts all reasons are also causes, whereas whereas in others they are totally separate categories. But I don't want to get into this debate here. For our purposes the distinction is important, because whereas a reason for believing can be refuted by logic, a cause of a belief might be emotional or pragmatic. To quote a common phrase online, you can't logic someone out of a position that they haven't logicked themselves into. So these two questions are good at separating the types of things that are worth challenging with reason and those logic probably won't make much headway on. If someone believes something because it was their father's dying words, you're very unlikely to convince them otherwise. Then honing in on the reasons someone believes something can give us an idea of where the flaws in their argument might lie. To return to the example of euthanasia, you might challenge the idea that euthanasia does not directly harm others, or that we have unrestricted rights to our own body. If you are religious, you might say that our bodies are partly the domain of God, or you might say we owe it to our community to continue living. The point is, now you have a good idea of why I believe what I believe and can challenge my reasoning. I know that this to a certain extent sounds really obvious, but you don't have to go far to see people completely misunderstanding the reasons for someone else's belief, or even worse, just assuming their reasons, possibly strawmanning them in the process. Think of the times you hear people say, well, of course you believe that you just want to see people suffer, or all Christians are the same, you're just scared of death. Instead of asking for the reasons or causes behind someone's belief, we just make up our own and argue with them instead. It is quite tempting after all, it's much easier, and these questions also encourage us to be more honest about why we hold our own views. We can learn to identify when we have a good set of reasons for a belief and when extra rational factors have crept in. There is nothing necessarily wrong with holding a belief that is not hewn straight from the granite rock of logic, but it's worth recognizing this just so we're aware of what metamaterial is supporting our viewpoints. But this line of inquiry links very well with another type of Socratic questioning, one that places the emphasis on empathizing with the views of other people in order to open our minds to all the possibilities we have not yet considered for the alternatives. There is a really famous clip in the UK of an Italian TV chef shouting, "If my grandmother had wheels she would have been a big." He meant it to mock someone who had just compared what he was cooking to a British-style carbonara, but I actually think this is kind of a fun thought experiment. If you had wheels in place of all of your limbs, how would that affect the way you see the world? You would probably think more in continuous distances than in individual steps. You would definitely have a greater awareness of which buildings in your area had ramp access. The whole orientation of your life would be subtly changed in innumerable ways, and I think this is a great thing to ask ourselves in discussions. If I had different experiences, how would I see this question differently? If I had grown up in a collapsing nation, I might understandably value security a little bit more than freedom. A lot of people say that when they have children or go through near-death experience, the priorities shift in a way that they could not possibly have predicted. Considering this can have a brilliant mind-opening effect on our worldview, because downstream of these perspective changes are all the alternative propositions that we could inadvertently be ignoring. For instance, by considering how we might view the world differently if we were raised in a highly competitive and borderline toxic environment, we might understand why some people are not so naively trusting as ourselves. On this channel I cover a lot of philosophers with pretty cynical views, and this is partly because by nature I am such a crude optimist, and so looking at these thinkers helps to counterbalance my own biases. This is also another great way of encouraging people to engage in critical thinking without directly confronting them. Navigating a discussion with someone staunchly advocating for the death penalty requires finesse and empathy, aiming not to confront but to foster open-mindedness and consideration of alternative perspectives. One effective approach is to gently probe their convictions by asking under what circumstances they would entertain the possibility of revising their stance. By encouraging them to explore both emotional and rational factors that could sway their position, we create space for introspection and critical reflection. For instance, prompting them to imagine a scenario where someone they knew had been falsely sentenced to death taps into their empathetic capacity, challenging them to confront the human cost of potential miscarriages of justice. Additionally, delving into rational considerations, such as the threshold of acceptable false convictions, encourages a more analytical approach. By asking what level of wrongful convictions would be sufficient to prompt a re-evaluation of their stance, we guide them towards considering the empirical realities and ethical implications of the death penalty. This approach aligns with the broader principle of questioning one's own position under various conditions, as discussed earlier. However, it expands the scope to encompass not only the conditions under which they would abandon their position but also the perspectives and alternatives they are willing to entertain. Ultimately, the goal is not to impose our own beliefs or judgments but to facilitate a journey of exploration and growth. By fostering a spirit of openness and receptivity to diverse viewpoints, we create opportunities for mutual understanding and intellectual enrichment, even in the most contentious of debates. Just not yet considering you might still end up believing the same things, and so might your discussion partner, but you will have a fuller consideration of the alternatives on offer, and if one seems more plausible you will then have the opportunity to switch your position. A lot of the time we don't know what we don't know, and this type of question is a good way of simulating what the discussion would look like through different eyes. We also might connect this with our previous question about the reasons and causes people hold certain beliefs even if your opponent is obviously mistaken. What about their lives and experiences have brought them to this point? You can even ask them. Tactful engagement indeed serves as the linchpin of productive discourse, where the art of disagreement transforms into an opportunity for mutual understanding. While it doesn't necessarily entail agreement with one's opponent, it fosters an environment conducive to reasoned debate, preventing the descent into chaos and animosity. By delicately probing the contours of each other's perspectives, both speakers gain insights into the underlying motivations and rationales guiding their interlocutor's stance. However, no toolkit for questioning is complete without delving into the realms of logic, where implications and consequences reign supreme. Enter the venerable reductio ad absurdum, a stalwart of philosophical argumentation. Here, the examination of the implications of an opponent's position serves as a crucible for discerning its veracity. By extrapolating the potential ramifications of a given stance, one can illuminate its inherent contradictions or expose the absurdity of its conclusions. This process of drawing out the logical consequences of a position being true is akin to peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing the hidden depths of its reasoning. Whether it leads to a decisive refutation or prompts a re-evaluation of one's convictions, the reductio ad absurdum is a potent tool for intellectual inquiry. In essence, by exploring the implications and consequences of our beliefs, we embark on a journey of self-discovery and enlightenment. It's a voyage that transcends the confines of mere debate, guiding us towards a deeper understanding of the world and our place within it. So, let us wield the tools of tactful engagement and logical scrutiny with finesse and precision, as we navigate the rich tapestry of human discourse in pursuit of truth and wisdom. You see examples of this a lot in debate around moral relativism. A very crude form of this position states that an action is good if I believe it is good is true. In this scenario, if I say that murder is wrong and someone else says that murder is right, both our positions would be rendered true. Hence there is a contradiction. Of course, this is a straw man version of moral relativism. They tend to respond by saying that we've misunderstood their position. They might instead say that the meaning of truth in the moral sphere is just relative to individual people, so I have my moral truths and you have yours, but they don't contradict. This is normally countered with another reductio argument stating that if that were the case we could never resolve moral disagreements, since every one of our moral beliefs would be true by definition. The moral relativists might then alter their position, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get sucked into a debate about moral relativism. I just want to look at the structures of the arguments involved. The responses to the moral relativist here are all of the form, well, if you take that position then this also must follow, but that's absurd, so the original position must be false. To use a technical term, they are modus tollens arguments. A modus opp's argument is of the form if A then B A therefore B, whereas a modus tollens argument is of the form if A then B not B therefore not A. So in the above example the argument was as follows: if moral relativism were true then we would not be able to solve moral disputes. We can solve moral disputes, therefore moral relativism cannot be true. And this is not just helpful for examining other people's positions, it is fantastic for putting our own views to the test. Some of the greatest critical thinkers in history have used this approach. For instance, much of St. Thomas Aquinas' great work Summa Theologica is about working out the consequences of different theological and philosophical views to see if they are acceptable. Likewise, a huge proportion of Plato's dialogues consist of Socrates testing out the consequences of his opponent's position and working out where they might end up contradicting themselves or asserting something that is philosophically tenuous. He doesn't always do this successfully. There's an infamous passage in the Meno that comes to mind, but it is still a cornerstone of his approach. The key questions to ask here are: if I believe this, what else would follow, or conversely. Contemplating the scenario where disbelief takes hold, we embark on a journey of hypothetical exploration, unraveling the cascading consequences that follow in its wake. Through this introspective lens, we navigate the labyrinth of implications, evaluating the ramifications of embracing or rejecting a particular worldview. It's akin to peering through the looking glass of possibility, weighing the burden of acceptance against the consequences of denial. Having traversed this intellectual terrain, we arrive at a crossroads of reflection, where the question of worthiness emerges as the arbiter of our convictions. We interrogate the very essence of our beliefs, probing the depths of their significance in light of the consequences they entail. It's a poignant inquiry that demands introspection and discernment, compelling us to confront the existential stakes of our ideological allegiance. But the journey doesn't end there. As we delve deeper into the recesses of reasoning, we encounter the final frontier of inquiry, the 6 questioning questions. These inquiries serve as a litmus test for the integrity of our logical framework, ensuring that no stone remains unturned in our quest for clarity. We scrutinize our understanding of opposing viewpoints, striving for a synthesis of comprehension that transcends mere surface-level disagreement. We interrogate the very foundations of our beliefs, distinguishing between reasons and causes to unveil the bedrock of our convictions. In essence, this holistic approach to questioning is a testament to the power of inquiry as a tool for intellectual growth and self-discovery. It's a journey that traverses the realms of possibility, confronting the unknown with courage and curiosity. And in the end, it's not just about finding answers, it's about embracing the journey of questioning itself, as a perpetual quest for truth and understanding. Are there any questions we want to ask that don't fall into any of these camps, and if so, what are they? This is slightly different to previous sections as it does not provide a series of questions that we can list off or a neat type of inquiry we can make. It instead outlines a sort of general attitude to discussion or debate. It is essentially a moment where we sit back and consult our intuitions if we have been involved in a lot of discussions or self-interrogations in the past. We might ask what we question then that we have not questioned now, or double-check that we have not made mistakes that were previously commonplace. Above all, it involves a certain level of epistemic humility, of recognizing that despite our best efforts we might have missed something. There is no step-by-step guide I can give you to asking this question, and arguably there shouldn't be. Learning how to think critically is like any skill. It is a slow and steady process refined over many years of practice. I have written and learned an awful lot about formal logic, and I've had a metric ton of arguments, but there is still so much I have yet to learn. The primary way to get better from here is just practice. Imagine embarking on a journey where every proposition encountered in the labyrinth of life becomes a potential opportunity for growth and insight. By integrating a set of probing questions into our daily interactions, we unravel the layers of truth, confronting both the propositions we encounter and the bedrock of our own beliefs. With each interrogation, our cognitive muscles flex and strengthen, honing our ability to discern the subtle nuances between sound argumentation and logical fallacies. As we traverse this intellectual landscape, our skills evolve incrementally, akin to a craftsman refining their artistry over time. Through diligent practice, we cultivate an instinctual knack for pinpointing the weak links in an argument, discerning where the fabric of logic frays, and identifying the biases and blind spots that cloud our own reasoning. Yet, amidst this pursuit of clarity, we must remain vigilant against the siren song of fallacious reasoning, those seductive traps that lure even the most astute minds astray. It's like navigating a treacherous terrain where missteps can lead us down perilous paths of faulty conclusions and flawed judgment. Enter the Beacon of Enlightenment, a video unveiling the 3 types of fallacies, serving as a compass to steer us away from the shoals of illogic. With keen insights and practical guidance, it illuminates the pitfalls to avoid and offers strategies to fortify our mental fortresses against the onslaught of flawed reasoning. But the Odyssey doesn't end there. It beckons us to linger, promising further revelations on the art of thinking to elevate our lives beyond mere existence. In this symphony of thought, we become virtuosos, conducting the harmonious orchestration of reason and intuition to orchestrate the masterpiece of our existence. Thank you for watching our video. N.